Good evening, everyone. Um, Team Artha is proud to collaborate with DD and Stritney, which is ISB's Digital Identity Research Initiative. And we are very proud to have with us Mr. Raghav Rao from Amazon. So thank you for taking out the time, and we are very, very honored to have you here with us today. Just as a brief introduction, Mr. Raghav has 25 years of experience as a finance professional in the FMCG and e-commerce industry. He has held various positions across many verticals: finance and accounting, supply chain, mergers and acquisitions, treasury, general management, you name it, and he's done it. He did his engineering from IIT Bombay, and he went on to IIM Calcutta for his MBA. He started off at HUL when he worked in 7 locations in 3 countries before he took charge as VP Finance and CFO for Amazon India. He's at the center of India's hottest industry today, and in his current role, he's building Amazon's customer franchise in a strongly contested e-commerce battle. And this is a space that is of interest to everyone right now, no matter what field you come from or what field you want to go to. We look forward to hearing from you and your experiences today, sir. And could we please have a big round of applause for Raghav, sir? In conversation with Raghav sir, we have none other than Professor Bhagwan Chaudhary. He needs no introduction here among students at ISB, but for those of you who are not aware, Professor Bhagwan did his MBA and PhD from the University of Chicago, and he was at UCLA for over 31 years. His commitment to finance, microfinance, and technology related to finance is best illustrated with his proposed FAB initiative, which is Financial Access at Birth, an initiative where every child has $100 in their bank account at birth, guaranteeing financial inclusion to everyone around. Thank you, Professor, for doing this for us, and we look forward to hearing from both of you today. And I'd like to invite both of you on stage for a very engaging discussion. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. How are we doing? A little louder. How are we doing today? Excellent. It's a great pleasure to be in conversation with Raghav Rao. So Raghav, your name is Raghav Rao, which if you shorten it, becomes R square. These students are very familiar with R square, isn't that right? In fact, I have a colleague called Richard Roll, who's also R square. Yeah. And there was a competition amongst finance professors to write a paper with the shortest title. So Fisher Black of Black and Scholes fame, in his presidential address, wrote a paper called Noise. Very short title. And when Richard Roll came up with his presidential address, he called his paper R square. Isn't that great? R square by R square. So I think, Raghav, you should write a paper called Responsible Retailing. How's that?
Responsible Retailing sounds good.
Okay, R square by R square. So, ladies and gentlemen, please.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
So, can I call you Raghav?
Sure, absolutely.
You're younger than me.
Yeah.
Okay. So you went to IIT Bombay, yeah. Not IIT Mumbai, IIT Bombay at Powai. Is that the right way to say it? Yeah. So you're a techie.
I was a techie. I was a computer science engineer. And one of the regrets my father has, and I think he still has that, is after I finished my engineering, I didn't join one of the tech companies. Infosys was coming up at that point of time. So I sort of disappointed him by going on to do my MBA in finance.
MBA in finance. So MBA is here. Did you guys hear this? Here, a lot of MBAs think that finance is not for engineers. They think finance is for those who have done CAs. Can you please disabuse them of that notion?
So so the irony of it is I joined back after some 20 odd years into Amazon as a tech company with my tech qualifications, but in a finance role. So in my role, I try to bring both of them together.
Okay. So you went to this other place in Calcutta for your MBA.
The other place, yes. Yeah, yeah.
ISB was not there at that time.
Yeah. So therefore, we had no competition at that time. Yeah.
You had no competition. Yeah. If ISB was there,
I think it's always good to have a number 2 around. So it helps to keep you on your toes. Yeah.
I just want to tell you that if ISB were there, they would not have admitted you.
Yeah, really? And why would that be?
because you went straight after your BTech.
That's
You see, we take people who have 4 to 5 years of experience. So my question is, how was it to do an MBA right after BTech? And
Yeah, I
we
think,
tell these students, no, go and get some experience, you'll get better. Is that true or is that not true? Of course, you don't know the other side, but what is your...
I think looking back, it's always the way I would look at it is I launched launched myself into a professional career maybe 1 or 2 years younger because of the path that I had chosen. But I definitely think looking back, I would have absorbed more from the MBA that I did if I had a couple of years of corporate experience before I went on to do my MBA. I don't think that's disputed at all.
You don't think that's disputed at all? No. So do you get these pangs about coming back and doing another one? No, I'm just kidding, I'm just kidding, of course.
Not quite. I think after 25 odd years, it doesn't really matter whether you had packed in a couple of years of corporate experience before you MBA.
I'm just joking. I have a habit of needling people. Do I do that often with people?
The way I look at it is, I was in a hurry to get into IMCAL, yeah, so I got in a hurry and that's okay.
He even said that name, IMCAL. Should we forgive him? Okay. All right. So yeah, I'm just playing with you. And for example, people often tell me as a moderator, you should not ask tough questions. Yeah. So I say, why not? Why not ask tough questions? And there are some questions, no matter how you answer, you get into a soup. Like, for example, I've heard that you've stopped beating your wife lately. I mean, what answer can you give that won't get you into trouble? Okay, so I'll try not to get...
That's a cliched one, Professor.
Okay, all right, okay, I'm full of cliches. Okay, all right. So you started your career with Eli Lilly, is that right?
Hindustan Unilever.
Hindustan Lever, which is not a finance company, but you started in a finance role there.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell our students that even though you were a finance role, you really had to understand the business and the marketing side to be able to do that job well? Is that right or not?
I think there was never a debate about it. In any good company, and HUL was no exception, when you join in finance, it is taken for granted that you will connect the dots in finance to business, and which means that since you already know finance, you need to start by knowing the business. And in fact, I have a little bit of what I call even today to people in my team, the fly in the wall test, that if a finance person in an office, a corporate office, is having a conversation with a business guy, and there's a fly on the wall listening into that conversation, even after 10 minutes, the fly on the wall should not be able to make out who's finance and who's business, because the conversations should be so intermingled with each other that finance should have injected business and business should have injected finance into the conversations. So that's my fly on the wall test for how finance and business should work.
I think that's brilliant, because when I was teaching finance, I tried to convey it to him, I don't know if it's stuck or not, was when it comes to valuation, the DCF has the numerator, which is the cash flow, and the denominator, which is the discounted rate. But the numerator, cash flow, is all about knowing the business. How do you get the cash flow? If you don't get the cash flow, you can't get the valuation. And if you don't understand the business, you won't know if the numerator is right. And then you can do as much beta as you want in the denominator, it's not going to help you.
And in some roles, it's not just the numerator and denominator, it is about the positive number and the negative numbers also.
Okay, tell us more. I don't understand that.
Whether you're making profits or not, and whether your cash flows discounted cash flows over an extended period of time are NPV positive or not, is really the heart of substance of value creation.
And for these new age companies, tech companies like Google and Amazon, that's a big issue.
That's a big issue, and I think that is where it's probably a good way to get into our conversation, that one of the roles that finance has in companies like these, where you may be making accounting losses today, the point is, are you taking actions and is your business on a trajectory so that the net present value of future cash flows is positive or not? And how do you figure that out so that you may be making losses today, but are you going to be making positive cash flows in future?
There has to be light at the end of the tunnel.
So that there is light at the end of the tunnel and there is economic value being created for shareholders at the back, and it ties back to what you're doing today.
Right.
Which is typically through whatever customer acquisition, customer retention, and customer engagement.
You use the word customer 3 times.
I will. I'll use it a lot more in our conversation today.
Okay. So why
I
is
work for
customer
Amazon.
so important?
Okay, so Amazon places customer at the center of everything that it does. I don't know if you guys are aware.
He paid me to ask that question, okay? So,
Yeah. The vision statement for Amazon is actually to be the most customer-centric company in the world. Yeah. So whatever business models we build, whatever actions we take, whatever decisions we drive, usually have the customer at the center of it. The start of our innovation cycle starts with the customer. We write what is called a press release, which is a 6-pager, which is a mythical newspaper headline release that if the innovation were to go live, what would a press reporter who's covering that innovation say, and what would the customer quote be for that innovation? So anyone who proposes an innovation in our organization has to actually write what is called a press release. It's called a PR FAQ, a press release, and frequently asked questions, which include customer quotes about what the customer would say if the innovation were to go live. And then of course you also bring in tech into it, you bring finance into it, but it makes sure that the customer is at the center of your organization.
okay, so this sounds very nice when you're sitting in Seattle. An Indian customer is a pain in the neck. True or
A
not?
customer is a customer everywhere. I think customers are similar, they're also dissimilar. A good way what we have learned is, Indian customers are in some sense not very different from customers abroad. In online commerce, as an example, all customers look for selection, pricing, and convenience, and Indians are no different. What's different about Indian customers is if you double click on pricing as an example, they get into things like exchange, payment in EMI, or zero interest installments, etc. So that's the definition of pricing and convenience. Convenience would either be faster delivery or hassle-free returns. So that is where the double click probably differs from Indian customers to elsewhere, but at an Uber level, they're all very similar, and you need to build your business model to keep them at the center.
And we were talking earlier, and you said
Yeah.
that Amazon actually pays attention to how you behave on the website,
Yeah,
and they mine that data, they use that data.
yeah,
How do they do it? We are getting into now this whole idea of using tech to understand the customer, using tech to understand the business. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So I think if you're any tech company, in fact, not just tech company, even if you're a manufacturing company as an example these days, because of the world in which we live in, which is basically saying that computing power has increased significantly, the number of IoT devices that are embedded into organizations and collecting data are humongous. The cost of data storage and the cost of computing has come down. All companies are building quite a bit of data as they go about the business. Competitive differentiation comes from being able to mine that data to be able to drive insights about whatever is going to work well in case of about what your customer wants. So using that data to derive insights, taking those insights, driving them into actions, and then the holy grail actually will be if you have enough data and computing power at your disposal to be able to, for example, make predictions about what the customer is going to do in the future. These are things which in the new era are going to make a lot of difference, and companies which do it better than anyone else would obviously have the customer's preference day in and day out.
So Amazon will soon tell me what I need before I know what I need.
I think not just Amazon, any company which
Or
understands
Google,
its any
or
company which
Facebook.
understands its customer well and has built up some understanding of that customer should be able to know the customer so well that you know what the customer's problems and needs are, and you have products and solutions to be able to serve them. So it's, I don't know if it's unique to Amazon, but we do try to do it better than anyone else.
All data-driven companies like Google or Facebook or Amazon fall into that. Now, that worries me a little.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why it worries me. This morning we had this discussion that data is becoming more important, of course, because data is the new oil, they say. Do you think that's true?
Yeah,
Is
I think
data
the
the
full quote is Data is a new oil. Obviously, data is the new oil of the 21st century. But what's more important is that analytics is the combustion engine which uses that data.
Okay.
And those organizations which are capable of building a better combustion engine are going to be more successful than organizations that don't.
Okay, so I'll tell you what worries me. That if data is really that important,
Yeah.
then companies who have large amount of data, like Google, or like Facebook, or like Amazon, have some sort of an advantage over smaller players. Should I be worried about it? Because in India, we are very paranoid about this. In India, we say, oh, data should be a public good. In fact, we had a whole discussion in the morning about the data that we are collecting should be a public good. It should not belong to Google or Amazon.
I cannot comment on policy regulations, etc. It's not in my domain. But all I will say is using information about your customer cannot really be bad for anyone. And especially if you subject it to the test that the business impact that you're creating is good for the ecosystem around you, and it helps to serve other customers better. And the customer, by the way, can be a lot of other players in the ecosystem. That should be good overall for the economy.
So you're saying some of those advantages will trickle down to small retailers?
They absolutely should. The advantages should trickle down to the entire ecosystem, because if you have a business model that wants to serve the ecosystem around you, small or large players, yes, that.
Okay. My goal is to go to audience rather quickly and take your questions. So I'm going to moderate the questions. If you ask a nasty question, I'm going to stop it or rephrase it so that it becomes more beautiful. So let me go to audience at this point. And if you don't have questions, I have many, many questions. I'm going to come back to it. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll give you a mic. The only rule here is that your first statement should end in a question mark, and there should be no second statement. Okay. Raghav is saying, as long as the data is being used, it can only help the customer.
Two questions in
The
one.
lady in the back in white.
So sorry,
white
these are
shirt.
actually two questions in one.
No,
From
no,
a
one
finance-
question. Where are you?
Okay, one question.
One question, yeah.
From a finance and customer point of view, where do you see Amazon 3 years down the line?
Can you hear it? I couldn't hear the question. Can you say it again?
From a finance and from a customer point of view, where do you see Amazon 3 years down the lane?
Where is Amazon? Sorry, what was the last part?
Where do you see Amazon 3 years down the lane?
Where do you see Amazon 3 years down the road?
Yeah, I think we have a saying in our company which we profoundly believe in, which is, it is just day one. Yeah, it may have been, I don't know, 15, 20 years since Amazon started off, but internally within the organization, we act as if it is day one, simply because there is so much more that can be done in the coming days. So even 3 years later, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that we will continue to act as if it is day one. We will constantly be innovating, we will constantly be trying to make things better for our customers, and we will constantly be trying to improve our operational efficiencies. So I don't think there'll be any difference between what we are today and what we are 3 years from now. Yeah, maybe some of the metrics on financials would be different,
So
but the
P,
mindset within the organization
price
would
to
remain
earnings
unchanged.
multiple. What is the PE multiple
I
today?
have no idea at all, and I don't
He
think
is the CFO, by the way, of Amazon India. Guys, do you know what the PE multiple is for Amazon? 300. Okay. Do you think we'll have a PE multiple of 300 3 years
I
from
think as
now?
long as you do a job of serving the customer will keep coming back to you. I don't think you should worry about P multiples. Leave that to the market.
Just keep doing positive NPV value projects.
Just keep serving the customer and make sure that you have a business case that creates a value. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that should be good enough. Yeah.
You're giving good answers.
Thank
Okay.
you.
The lady. Tell us who you are and with your question.
Yeah, hi, I am Sheenu, and I am working at Oracle. So I have flown in from Bangalore this morning. My question is, the brand Amazon Basics is curating data from the website, and that's how the products come into the picture. Do you think that is harming the small merchants that are selling on Amazon? Because that data
Okay, so we had two different versions. You are saying that the Amazon ecosystem is actually helping suppliers down the stream. She's saying, is the small retailer, if you can think of the small retailers in competition with Amazon, is there a tension in which the small retailer is hurt?
I think I answered that question earlier, that if you use the information that you have about the customer to improve things for the customer, we take it as an article of faith that it cannot be injurious to anyone, and we shall do so in a very responsible manner.
Okay, but let me raise one other concern, which is because data has this property that whoever has more data, in fact, becomes more valuable, like Google, like eBay. This was going to create firms that are too big. And when you have firms that are too big, there is a danger of fragility. What do you think about
Professor, I'm not an authority on that. I think that's an area best left to academicians like you.
that? What do you guys think? Should we worry about fragility? Or do you think it leads to fragility? Okay.
I think customers should vote with their wallet every single time. If you like the product and serving that is being offered, go back to it. Otherwise, don't. And that's
Okay,
the
so
best
let
way
me bring in the academic view a little bit. That argument that customer knows best takes into account only customer as an individual. But fragility arises from collective action of people, which the individual is not able to incorporate. There might be negative externalities. So if we all flock to Google and we are beholden to Google, if for some reason Google fails, there is a danger. And we kind of learned this lesson in finance with the financial crisis in 2007 to 9. And I think that is what the concern is. But I'm going to go back to the audience. Yes, sir. The man in the dark jacket and a white shirt. If you can give him the...
Hi. So just continuing from that previous question, sir, you mentioned that Amazon, the work which Amazon does helps the customers and distributors downstream. So we saw that the draft e-commerce policy was launched in 2019 earlier this year, and the work is still ongoing on implementing that. And we saw radical changes, including removal of deep discounting, as well as private brands offered on Amazon, Flipkart, and other online retailers. So if that was to implement strictly, in the Indian marketplace, or do you think the business model will change, or do you think the government has this perception, contrary to what you were saying, that it doesn't the business models which Flipkart and Amazon run?
So let's make it easy. He's not going to comment on the policy part, but you can comment on how a small retailer might benefit or not be benefited.
I think the small retailer, if he's a customer of Amazon, I think the business model and the way we work will make sure that the small retailer benefits.
So for example, there might be a small retailer whose reach was very local. Let's say I created an achar that was only very good locally. Amazon gives an opportunity to this retailer to actually become national or even global, which that retailer may never had that possibility.
So let me
So
just
that's the positive side.
build upon that. Amazon is a marketplace, and it is a marketplace where anyone can sign up and join and launch their products and services. And in fact, it is designed in a manner that you can do so and offer your products and services with the least amount of friction. So that's a fantastic opportunity for any small retailer to actually compete on an equal footing with somebody who's much larger than them because of the advantage that they get by being on the marketplace. In fact, we have a mission statement that it is our intent in India to transform the way India buys, transform the way India sells, and we profoundly believe that if we are successful in doing so, we'll be able to transform India itself. And this is because buying and selling is the heart of any economic activity for any country. And if you can remove the friction between a buyer and seller, whether it is a product or a service, it's ultimately going to be good for the ecosystem.
So you're saying you're more of a market. You're matching buyers and sellers.
We are a marketplace which connects buyers and sellers.
So that's like eBay.
With the least amount of friction in an openly transparent manner.
But that sounds like eBay.
Probably. I mean, there are differences between eBay and us, but they're too technical in nature. But I think the best way to look at it is if I'm somebody who's in a village in India versus somebody who's in a large metro, a marketplace puts both customers on a level footing and opens up the same selection for both sets of customers, the same pricing for both sets of customers for them to be able to make their choice. So in that sense, it removes friction, which conventional ways of buying and selling might possibly have.
So that was the positive side. Now let me say another side to it, which is Amazon is collecting data not only on consumers, but they're also collecting data on the retailers who are on your site. So I might learn that a retailer who wasn't there, now the retailer is selling achar, the Amazon might decide, you know, achar is a really good product. And soon they start making achar in Delhi instead of Ajmer, where I come from, and I'm out of my business. Is that a possibility?
I think it's only axiomatic that if you continue to behave in that manner, new retailers will not join you as a marketplace. And the moment that happens, it becomes a negative cycle, and that is ultimately the destruction of the marketplace.
But
so we will make sure that that does not happen.
But that's individual versus collective again, right? What comfort do I have as a small retailer that my information will ultimately end up in Amazon or Google or Facebook's hand, and then they will create a better product because they have more resources, they can produce it cheaper, and should I be worried about? But I'm not saying that doesn't happen in other fields. That happens even without Amazon. When people learn about, you collect information and people realize you can do it better, that kind of competition happens everywhere. But I think that was the intent of that question. Is that right or not? I'm putting words in your mouth. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to other questions. The man behind the camera. That's you, yes.
So it has been said that Amazon makes money from their AWS businesses more than their e-commerce businesses. I mean,
Amazon makes more money from the AWS business.
Yeah, their cloud infra is probably more profitable than their e-commerce.
I think the numbers are in public domain. The AWS business is a large and profitable business. The e-commerce business is also a large and profitable business. If you go through our financials, I'm sure you'll know what the relative sizes are. But is that your question?
You're not going to tell us which is larger?
I think the information is available in public domain. So.
But will you tell us or not? Just kidding. No, so I think, so let me see if I can answer. So you don't want to look at the current level of earnings as a size of the market. So it's possible that AWS is more cash flow rich because the costs are less, whereas the retail business requires a lot of investment. So on an earnings basis, it may have a short, but it may have a higher long-term value. Does anyone know how the breakup, do you guys know how to do, what's the value of the AWS business versus the retail business? We should be able to do that. Have we taught you this in CorpFin 1 and 2 or not? Are you a student?
No.
You're not a student, okay, so maybe you don't know how to do it. I'm just kidding, just kidding. But that's a good project, isn't it? Let's figure out the value of AWS business, not just the current earnings. His point is, earnings are in the public domain, you can look at it, but what is the present value of this is the more important question.
I won't know that, yeah, sorry.
He is answering totally like a non-finance person. You would have flunked my class for sure. You know, okay. No, I'm just joking. Yes, sir. The gentleman in the black shirt there.
Hi. See, in the US, Amazon is largely a marketplace, and no 1P or 3P, what we call as third party. In India, you do a lot of 1P. Is there a reason, and would you move into the pure 3P model sometime later?
I don't think that's, just to correct on facts, India is a marketplace. The US is probably a mix of both retail and 3P marketplace.
But India also, you have a lot of. Is India a pure marketplace? Yeah,
India
you
is
have,
It's more of a marketplace, isn't
India
it?
is a marketplace.
Because you don't manufacture anything.
no, but
in
don't
India.
you own companies like Cloudtail and Appareo and all that in a
No,
way?
we don't own companies like Cloudtail and Appareo.
Okay. Other questions? Arush. Please give her a mic.
Amazon is into a lot of things, not only the cloud services and the marketplace, of course, but they are into Prime Video, the Fire Stick. As a CFO, what do you feel about this diversification, and is there something at play here? Is this a long-term strategy, and what's next for Amazon in terms of this kind of diversification, which is basically everywhere?
I think it's a good question. I think it's a question about what's the kind of framework that is used to evaluate when you have different innovation ideas that are put on the table. And in any organization, you will always have plenty of innovation ideas. I think the way we look at it in Amazon, we follow 3 or 4 questions that we ask ourselves. First is whatever is the innovation idea, once a PR FAQ has been written, and I explained it to you.
In the US, Amazon is largely a marketplace, and no 1P or 3P, what we call as third party. In India, you do a lot of 1P. Is there a reason, and would you move into the pure 3P model sometime later?
I don't think that's, just to correct on facts, India is a marketplace. The US is probably a mix of both retail and 3P marketplace.
But India also, you have a lot of. Is India a pure marketplace? Yeah,
India
you
is
have,
a,
It's more of a marketplace, isn't
India
it?
is a marketplace.
Because you don't manufacture anything.
but
in
don't
India.
you own companies like Cloudtail and Appareo and all that in a
No,
way?
we don't own companies like Cloudtail and Appareo.
Okay. Other questions? Arush. Please give her a mic.
Amazon is into a lot of things, not only the cloud services and the marketplace, of course, but they are into Prime Video, the Fire Stick. As a CFO, what do you feel about this diversification, and is there something at play here? Is this a long-term strategy, and what's next for Amazon in terms of this kind of diversification, which is basically everywhere?
I think it's a good question. I think it's a question about what's the kind of framework that is used to evaluate when you have different innovation ideas that are put on the table. And in any organization, you will always have plenty of innovation ideas. I think the way we look at it in Amazon, we follow 3 or 4 questions that we ask ourselves. First is whatever is the innovation idea, once a PR FAQ has been written, and I explained it to you earlier, is it clear about the customer problem that it is going to solve? Yeah, you may have an innovation and you may articulate it in a manner which sounds very attractive, but we ask ourselves, are we clear about the customer problem, and is the innovation going to make the life of the customer better or not? So that's the first question that we ask. The second question we ask is, the solution that we provide to the customer's problem, is it better than what anyone else has to offer? That's the second question that we offer. The third question that we ask is, can we do so in a manner which will help us make money at the end of it? And the fourth one is it going to become a large opportunity at some point in the future? Because we realize that we cannot dissipate our resources if the idea is not going to become very large. So only if the answer to these 4 questions is yes or positive do we go ahead and fund that particular project. So once again, what is the customer problem and what is it that we're trying to solve? Is the solution better and differentiated versus any other solution that is already there in the market? Can this solution become a large business in future? And can this large business become profitable? So only if the answer is yes, do we go through it.
To
And
all
I'm sure
4
Fire
questions.
TV Stick and all the others would have gone through that particular
To all 4
evaluation.
questions, okay.
To all the 4 questions.
So you said earlier, and I think we have heard this, and every company these days says they use AI and ML, but Amazon actually does use ML and AI.
Yeah.
Can you tell us very briefly
Yeah.
how you use ML and how you use AI and what the difference is?
So, yeah, I'm sure all of us have heard about AI and ML, but it's usually, it's good to remind ourselves what exactly is the difference between traditional computing and what is machine learning. A traditional computing, very simply, in terms of a block diagram, is you've got a hardware, which is a computer, you've got a program, you've got input coming in, and the program and the hardware, which is a computer, converts that input into an output. So that's simply the way traditional computing works. In machine learning, it's a little different. You take previous examples of input and output. So you take history, and the word that is used is, I think, training data. You take previous instances of all input and what was the output for that particular input, and then you create a program. The program is then the output, which ties all of this back, and that program is then loaded back into the computer so that you then predict what the output is going to be for the fresh round of input that is going to come in. Now, let me just sort of bring that to life through a very simple application.
Yeah, give us an example.
Yeah. So one of the problems in e-commerce is essentially how do you reduce the cost associated with rejects and returns? Yeah. So if 100 orders have been placed on a website and the marketplace serves those 100 orders, a certain percentage of them get rejected by their customer, and it is statistically evident that if a customer pays or opts to pay for cash on delivery when paying the order, the percentage of rejects is higher, whereas if the customer has opted for a net banking or debit card or credit card, then because you're committed to that purchase, the reject is lower. Now, every reject results in an incremental cost. So one of the options that you have is when the web page loads on your mobile or your desktop and the customer is clicking and wanting to place an order, you actually have a choice whether to share with the customer whether you want to surface the option of paying cash on delivery or not. Now, if you make things easy for yourself by saying all orders have to be prepaid, a lot of new customers would not sign up for shopping on the marketplace, because most new customers, the psychology is, hey, I'm doing online shopping for the first time, I don't want to give my debit card or credit card details, let me pay on cash on delivery after the product has shown up on my doorstep, because I don't even know what that product would look like. And maybe as a period of time, after they become comfortable, subsequently they start using a debit card and credit card. So you've got to be very careful about exercising the option of not giving the customer a choice of paying cash on delivery. However, if you have previous examples of different combinations of customer profile, name, mobile number, location, PIN code, the address that they've given, their previous shopping history, then using that past data and whether that data resulted in a reject or not, you can actually predict when fresh data comes in for somebody who's trying to shop, whether that's likely to result in a rejection or not. And basis that prediction, which your machine learning will then quantifies into probably some kind of a broad success score, you can then take whatever actions you want to take in the fraction of the second that the product
So how do you use that information? So suppose
you
you find out that those who want cash on delivery are likely to reject it more. Do you charge them more?
No, we don't charge them more, because...
So how do you use that information?
So you could probably give that customer a choice of paying cash on delivery or not paying cash on delivery. So that's an example of an action that a marketplace could possibly take. Yeah.
But if you're not using that information, because what you're saying is the effective cost of serving one customer is higher than the effective cost.
Yeah.
But you don't discriminate in pricing?
No, you don't discriminate in pricing. Pricing absolutely would be, if you discriminate on pricing between two customers, that's a trust buster. That's one of our tenets, that customers everywhere looking at the same product would always see the same prices.
It always. There was a
There
was a period
that
in
goes
which
into the core principle of being transparent on a marketplace. And if you play with that, you violate the trust that the customer would have, and that's not something that would ever be open for execution.
But you couldn't experiment with things like discounts, or I mean that's one way to.
No, you won't.
Maybe Amazon tried it at one point, but I think you quickly rejected that idea. That was before you were at Amazon.
I think the cornerstone of the principle would be that anything which risks the trust that the shopper or the customer would have on the marketplace, you would never play with that.
Okay. So
it's an article of faith that by doing so, ignore what is going to happen in the short term, but in the long term, that is going to result in the right size of business for you.
Okay.
Yeah,
This
so that's the
gentleman
article of
over
faith.
the blue shirt has a question.
Hi, so I am Pratyush Alan. I am founder at FingPay. We are a payments collections company at the last mile. My question is for the Amazon Pay. I am keen to know the future plans for Amazon Pay. How would you want to scale it up, and any differentiation from the current business? Or because Amazon Pay is very similar currently from a customer point of view to other payment options.
So I can't obviously share specifics of
You're
future
asking
plans
him
of
for a trade
Amazon Pay,
secret. You are
but
a
I will give you a
competitor.
broad. I'll give you a broad
No, I am
answer.
just asking him that how can he can create a customer here.
I think similar to what you said in your panel discussion a few hours earlier, in India, the payment space is something where there's a huge opportunity for solving a lot of problems. Let's start with, and I'll use the same framework of what I used a few minutes back of examining the opportunity, and maybe that will lend itself to your answer. Today, a customer who's trying to shop online has a problem of how to make payments. As you alluded to it in your panel discussion also earlier, not all customers have a bank account, and even if they have a bank account, they don't really have a RuPay card. So if I am a customer, I don't know, in some corner of the country, in Jharkhand, Bihar, or even in Mumbai, I'm a migrant labor, I don't really have an option of being able to pay online. So that starts with the definition of the customer problem. So if I can come up with a solution to maybe, I don't know, it could be anything to allow that person to prepay and have an electronic wallet, which is then debited when the payment is done. That could be one example. Or because I know that customer, I can offer credit up to a certain value and the customer can then pay me later on. I then solve that problem of this particular profile of customer not being able to make payment for an online transaction. So we believe that there is a problem statement pertaining to the customer, and it is perfectly in sync with what the government and the country wants to do in terms of financial inclusion and making sure that, for example, online purchases are open for everyone. And therefore, Amazon Pay or whatever product we build will be a step in that direction. Now, we have to make sure that this product solves a problem for this customer better than anyone else. And that's, of course, a continuous improvement process.
Let me ask a question about culture.
Yeah.
What kind of culture is there at Amazon to work for? And is it different in India than it is, say, in the US, the work culture?
I think suffice to say that culture is a very important ingredient for us at Amazon. And what is remarkable about Amazon is the culture at Amazon is summarized almost entirely into 14 leadership principles. And
14?
14 leadership principles. And you'll Google for it and you'll get it.
Good.
And I would actually strongly
I
recommend.
thought you were going to list all of them.
I could list all of them, but I won't.
Don't.
Yeah. And the leadership principles are actually written in a very simple and easy to understand. They start with, for example, customer obsession, invent and simplify, have backbone, disagree, and commit. So our
That's
entire
what's
culture.
on the board. That's what on the board. That's not what a culture is. Culture is how people feel. If I work to Amazon, do I feel that other people are empathetic to me, or is it a dog-eat-dog world?
Yeah. So let's start with maybe, I don't know, let's take a couple of leadership principles and let me try to answer what you said. A good example is customer obsession. Yeah? I think for an organization to be truly customer obsessed, there are a few things that must happen. You must have a business model that revolves around the customer. I think I explained that earlier. We make sure that we measure our metrics for execution completely revolve around the customer. So whenever we start a review of a business, the first part of the review is actually what we call the voice of the customer. In fact, in our weekly review sessions,
Raghav,
we very often
you're not answering my question.
I'm answering your question. Just give me a couple of minutes. Yeah. So we start our review with playing back recordings of customer complaints that have been received in the last 1 week. So that's an example of our culture bringing to life what is probably just written as a few sentences on that leadership principles. That's customer obsession. The second one is, let me give an example. We have something called have backbone, disagree, and commit. So whenever we hire people, or whenever we evaluate people, or whenever we consider people for promotion, we actually evaluate them basis whether they have demonstrated these leadership principles or not. In this example that I gave, have backbone, disagree, and commit, we actually assess whether that person is able to articulate his or her point of view in a meeting, even where, let's say, more senior stakeholders are present. And if that person is able to articulate that point of view, once a decision is taken, and it is completely okay for that person to disagree with that decision, but that does not mean that the person blocks the execution of that decision. So how did the person behave under these conditions, as an example, is an input to how that person is appraised or promoted or even hired. That's an example of how a leadership principle is actually interlocked into the way you run your business.
Okay, we are going to do a fact check because I actually have an Amazon employee sitting on the floor in a pink shirt who works for Amazon. Anupam, can you please stand up? He's my student. So you work for Amazon. Do you display a backbone and is it tolerated?
Yeah, I think any decision when we take and it's logically supported by the fact, then people listen to you and accordingly then we act. So, but it has to be having a logical logic or some data to back your whatever choice or decision that you are making.
Okay, one more question. When you go to Amazon, do you feel loved?
So when I went, we call it NHO, for new hire orientation. So day one was, whatever I experienced on day one, I've been experiencing similar energy and similar type of response from the people as it was on day one. So it has not changed, that's what I felt. And in a way that shows that however you have been behaving in, say, the last 2-3 months, the response of the people and their attitude towards you is only dependent on the way you have been working. And
okay, so do you want your payment in Amazon Pay or cash? Okay, no, please, thank you.
And by the way, he is completely free to say that he wants it in cash or whatever, because that's then feedback to us from a customer that the customer is not happy with Amazon Pay, and that is what drives.
I was talking about the promotion you're going to give him. Okay, right. Let me ask. We have just a few minutes left, so let me ask you a question about. You started, so I said Eli Lilly, I was misreading, Kimberly Clark Lee, what it was called when you perhaps started. So that was a totally different, I mean, I remember at that time, the top job you could get was with Hindustan Lever. Yeah. I mean, so you must have been a really good student.
I hope so.
Yeah, okay.
I know I interned with Hindustan Unilever and they chose me back with a permanent offer, so I guess
yeah,
that's
of course, internship is the way to go. Yeah. Now that was 94.
Yeah.
Right? In 2019, for our current students, would you recommend, if they want to be where you are today, in let's say the next 15 years, would you recommend that they start like this the way you did, or you think the world has changed?
I think I wouldn't want to answer about X versus Y because that may not be the right way to answer the question. But it's a good question that you ask, and I think the right way to answer that question would be to give you a framework to make that decision. And I think what has worked very well for me, and I have no hesitation in recommending, is always join an organization where you are surrounded by the best minds in the country, not just the country, but in the world. So if you work in a place where you're working shoulder to shoulder with people who are the best in their class, I think automatically over a period of a few years that you work, it grows on you. That's number one. Number two, always make a choice for working in an organization which is completely ethical, has a high governance standards, good code of conduct, etc. That's something that really makes you into a better professional going forward. So that's something that I would recommend. And always look for signs that you're joining an organization where integrity is held high and where thought leadership counts for a lot, because those are the organizations that will really survive going forward. And the fourth one I would add is the organization should be sufficiently focused on the customer, because I profoundly believe after 25 years that those are the organizations that will really survive for the future. So these are the four things, and it could be X or Y, it could be Z,
quickly,
but that's your criteria.
Should I start in a startup or should I start in a big firm if my ultimate goal is to become a CFO of Amazon?
I think both are good, and I don't know, I mean, becoming a CFO may not necessarily have to be a goal.
Or CEO, let's say. Suppose I want Jeff's job.
Yeah.
Do you get to see Jeff Bezos?
Jeff started a startup, so that's a good way to become a CEO of starting a startup.
But do you get to see him?
Yes, I do. I saw him 2 weeks back.
Is he a nice guy?
He's a nice guy.
Okay, question. You had a question, yes.
Good evening, sir. I'm Tanupriya and I'm a student here at ISB. So I had the opportunity to work in a traditional finance role at ITC. My question is that how would working at Amazon, working in finance roles at Amazon, where you have to work very closely with business teams, as you were mentioning, be challenging or be different from traditional finance roles in industry?
It's a good question. I think the role of finance remains the same in a traditional company like XYZ or a new age company like ABC. The role of finance is always as co-pilot to the business head, to make sure that resource allocation is done well, to understand performance management, to make sure that long-term targets are set, and you take decisions in the short term which actually maximizes value for the long term. I think that fundamentally remains the same. It does not change. I think what changes between maybe the old age companies and the new age companies is that there is a lot more tech in some of the new age companies. And tech, as we discussed earlier, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of analytics. So the weightage that is given to analytics is much higher. You would use new generation tools like artificial intelligence and machine learning, and a lot of it would be what actions do I take today that help me predict what is going to happen in the future, so that I take option A versus option B that maximizes the right decision from a long-term point of view. That's something that you're able to do in a new era company, because you have a lot of information about what action customers will take in future if you subject them to a certain stimulus today. Whereas in traditional companies, a lot of your time and energy actually goes in improving your unit economics in the current year's P&L. Yeah? So your current quarter, if you're able to improve your margins from X to Y, that is where a lot of your energy goes, because you take it as an article of faith that if you improve your margins in the current period, which is the current quarter from X to Y, that drives long-term value creation. Whereas in the new age company, you take actions that will probably create value in the future, because you have a very high confidence level basis the data that these actions are going to lead to the customer coming back again and again, and this will result in whatever positive net present value of future cash flows for the future. So that's a little bit of difference, but it's a very important difference. And the difference is because you have capabilities associated with analytics, data, machine learning at your disposal.
So you're sitting a nice evening after the conference and you're having beer with Jeff Bezos in Seattle.
Yeah.
And Jeff says, Raghav, if there was one thing you could change about Amazon, tell me, I'm listening.
Very little.
What would that be?
Very little.
Very little? Wow.
Yeah. I think that's the...
and if I say, Raghav, you're not showing your backbone.
Yeah. So, no, it has nothing to do with backbone. I think I made the point earlier, and I'm consistent with that we would continue to act as if it were day one, because that's the way we want to drive our DNA. It is day one. It is quite okay to make mistakes. It is quite okay to act with speed. It is quite okay to take bets, keep innovating. Don't get into what Jeff calls a day two culture, which is bureaucracy, a reduced speed of action, and an inability to take bets simply because the organization has become so large that you can't move the needle. So you would continue to operate tomorrow or make changes as if it is today, which is the way Amazon is.
So I'm going to be Jeff again and say, Raghav, you're being complacent. If you think nothing needs changing, that's complacency. And
I would say that what we
hate
should
complacency. Amazon needs to be on top of it.
Yeah.
So you must tell me one thing.
I would say invest more in India. So that's
Oh, all right. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, please give him a big round of applause. Thank you very much for your honest, insightful questions, answers.
Thank you for your sharp and incisive questions.
And Raghav will be around for a little bit more longer to interact with you guys informally. And you're staying for dinner with us, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you all for coming. And it was a great pleasure to speak with you, Raghav.
Thank you for inviting me here.